Watch this.
I didn't expect the opposition to information that's out there.
There's a lot librarians didn't expect to happen when they chose to be in charge of books, like what's about to happen to the library in the little town of Donnelly, thanks to a new library law. Idaho's lead attorney, the guy that's supposed to be the go-to in all legal matters against the state, has now been removed from representing the state in a controversial canceling of a real estate sale. The ITD deal keeps getting more twisted. Oh, Idaho Democrats, they're about to pick their choice for president. I wonder who it's going to be. Librarians warned our state, at least they warned our state lawmakers, this is going to happen. And now it has. The Donnelly Public Library is for adults only. Any child who wants to go in and get a book or even just meander through the modest room of bookshelves has to be supervised by their parent or guardian. The library fears legal repercussions for letting an unaccompanied child just get a look at inappropriate materials or what they consider inappropriate materials. Governor Brad Little signed House Bill 710 into law on the last day of the legislative session, and it kicks in on July 1st. So the answer for some, well, full-time librarians are now part-time bouncers.
The lineup into Donnelly is correctly correlated to the tagline,
We are definitely at a crossroads.
where the watering hole plays the same tune as the local library.
We decided to become an adult-only library.
Tough call.
Yeah.
By Sherry Shalene.
Safely prepare ourselves to receive these fines.
Because the legal waters are muddy.
Oh, I've read it at least 100 times.
And the path ahead is unclear.
Move that piece of material to an adult section of the library, the problem goes away.
But logistics limit a one-room library from complying, even if they want it.
I don't have an extra room. I don't have a place to put it.
And honestly, they don't want to move some of the questionable books anyway.
This legislation would impact books like To Kill a Mockingbird. To Kill a Mockingbird, the premise of the book is based around a rape. And that rape, in fact, is sexual content. And so according to HB 710, that book would be subject to litigation.
Fines run a $250 minimum, with added damages and legal fees to boot.
There hasn't been anything like this
It's a hard hit
that's happened before, and it's really rough.
for Erin Wright.
It wasn't something any of the librarians were for.
She's a published author.
Nobody asked us.
And in small rural library districts,
It's going to disproportionately impact us.
they have nobody to ask for help either.
We don't have an attorney on retainer.
But they do have a loved summer camp. You guessed it, for kids.
We have a child care crisis in Valley County that is unprecedented. And so we are going to continue our summer camp.
And Donnelly Library offers waivers for parents to exempt their kids and family, but that paperwork has a narrow spine.
The waiver is only for programming.
Not for homeschool kids, not for the general public.
The waiver is for programming purposes.
It's like a bar. You can't come in here.
I don't necessarily like this analogy, but we are more of the liquor store. You don't get to come in here without your parents.
Pull the books or bar the kids.
Great. You don't like it? You do not have to read it. I promise. This is not assigned reading in your high school.
No, it's much more serious than that. This is an assigned mandate from the state. Crossroads between the mountains and a hard place.
My hope is that it's fought. I hate to say that I hope that Meridian or Boise or Coeur d'Alene carries the burden for us, but I hope the first $250 fine is one of the big libraries.
The reason Sherry does hope that a bigger library is the first to get cracked by this is because they do have that infrastructure, perhaps deeper pockets to have an attorney. And maybe there is a challenge from this, because that is her biggest hope, Brian, is that this law has some sort of a challenge to it and it is struck down, because it's not, you don't become a librarian so you can stand at the door and tell kids they can't come in the door.
Right, and I spoke to a couple librarians today, and they are all hoping that there is some sort of injunction before this law goes into effect on July 1st, as you mentioned, that there is some sort of legal action. We'll just have to wait and see. And there are a lot of rural libraries out there, a lot of one-room libraries across the state of Idaho, because it is so widespread. Thank you very much, Andrew. So is Donnelly alone in this decision? How many other small-town libraries are considering drastic measures? in order to comply with Idaho's new library law this summer. So I called around to a few of them, like in Garden Valley, in Stanley, and in Riggins. The community library, like several others, are in the middle of updating their challenge book policy to include the language from the soon-to-be-in-effect law. That's what I was told was happening in Riggins. Here's how it is. The written notice from the parent or minor to relocate the book they consider harmful, that's part of the process. The library then has 60 days to remove that book and move it to an area with adults-only access, or they could choose to keep it where it is after reviewing it. If they leave it there, well, that's when the child or parent or guardian can sue for $250. But that's not it. They can also sue for other damages. But for school libraries like the Salmon River School District Library, it's that review process which can also be costly in both time and money. Buying books for the board to review, and then it takes them time to read it. So if someone shows up and challenges, say, 10 or 15 books at once, well, that could mean hundreds of dollars and hundreds of hours. While those things are a concern for the Camas, they are a concern, I should say, for the Camas County Community Library, that's not their biggest concern. Stephanie Jewett has a master's in library science, and 5 years ago, she took the director job in Fairfield. It's a town with about 200 people living in it, and their library has never had a book challenged, ever. Yet here they are, updating their materials reconsideration policy to accommodate the new law. That's not the only way, though, it will impact them. Stephanie tells us the library is about 3,800 square feet, one room, as we mentioned. They do have a storage room in the back with a bookshelf that they could possibly clear off, where they could keep a book that has been challenged. But is that a reasonable expectation for a one-room library?
It depends on what you consider reasonable. The process itself is not onerous. I feel like the idea of it is unreasonable. I feel like there are a lot of people who come into a library who might want to learn about something that they don't feel comfortable talking to a librarian and asking for. And right now, they can go up to a shelf and they can find a book and they can look at it, they can get the information they want, and they can put it back on the shelf if they want, and they can walk out the door having gained that information. With this new law, potentially that is not going to be possible. They're going to have to ask for it if they want it. And that, I feel like that goes against what a library is for.
Some people could say that, you haven't had any challenges. It's probably not going to impact you guys at all. So you shouldn't have to worry about it.
Some people have said that, but again, I feel like the principle is there. The
library in Donnelly has decided they're just going to go adults only. No kids allowed without parental permission, I guess, without a parent with them. Is that something you guys have considered?
That's something that we talked about at first, but I don't want to do that. We're right across the street from the school. We have one school here in town, a K through 12 school. We're right across the street, and when school lets out every day, we have an influx of kids coming in, and I would hate to have to stand at the door and tell them they cannot come in. A lot of the kids come over and they're here until their parents get home from work. And this is a safe, welcoming, warm place for them to be. And I don't want to stop that.
Stephanie says she also worries about people now with the backing of a state law, and they could wield it like a weapon to push their agenda. People who aren't local taxpayers and only sent their kids into a local library in order to challenge and remove certain books. Barring any lawsuit, as we talked about, that law will be in effect July 1st. Well, it was just a line item on a transportation department budget. The sale of the Idaho Transportation Department campus in Boise for nearly $52 million. But like that thread on a sweater that you can't help but notice is fraying, a raveling, if you will, some lawmakers gave that line item a tug and the whole thing began to unravel. The sale was blocked, the budget passed without it, the governor refused to sign it, but it became law anyway, and now a lawsuit has been filed. But the unraveling continues. We learned this week some key players who should have been told about court filings were not. And by key people, I mean two of the top leaders in Idaho's executive branch. The governor, the secretary of state, and the attorney general are three legs to the stool that is the state board of examiners. And now we're learning one of the legs of that three-legged stool has been removed from the legal process of the ITD lawsuit. Joe, you've been following this story for us. Governor Little says he was not made aware of some certain filings. We asked this yesterday that came from the paperwork or from the AG's office. We asked yesterday, were there any repercussions of this? appears there are.
Yeah, there are repercussions, and we also asked the third leg of that stool about their involvement. So let's touch on all of this, Brian. So yes, to answer your question, it appears so. There are consequences. More paperwork filed with the Idaho Supreme Court, and it shows that there is new counsel representing ITD in the Department of Administration. More on that in a minute. Previously, though, it was the AG, Raul Labrador, representing all the respondents in the suit. And as Brian touched on, Governor Little's office tells me again today that they had no knowledge of the brief and the answer to the lawsuit that was filed on their behalf in the Idaho Supreme Court. So they're pushing back on the AG's statement that we shared with you yesterday that Governor Little was informed of the legal strategy for the Board of Examiners at least 1 week before the brief was due. Along with the Department of Administration and the Idaho Transportation Department, the Board of Examiners is one of the parties, respondents in this case. And so that board is Governor Brad Little, Attorney General Raul Labrador, and the Secretary of State, Phil McGrain. Those three are the Board of Examiners, and that board has the constitutional power to examine all claims against the state of Idaho, claims like the ITD suit. So I asked the Secretary of State's office if they were aware of the court filings and the content of it. They write to me in a quote, in an email, quote, "As a member of the Board of Examiners, Secretary McGrain did not become aware of the suit until after the filing had been made. He is hopeful that the Board of Examiners will be removed from the suit going forward," end quote. So, did the Attorney General do state business on behalf of his clients without their knowledge? Governor and the Secretary of State seem to say yes. Attorney General, meanwhile, says that Governor Little knew that the deadline was coming and he didn't call a meeting to discuss. So we mentioned a change of counsel a minute ago. Attorney General Labrador is no longer the counsel for ITD or the Department of Administration. Governor Little signed a letter, this letter right behind me, hiring a local attorney, Joan Callahan, to represent those two agencies. And the letter says, quote, "I have consulted with the Attorney General regarding the appointment of separate counsel. The AG remains counsel, though, for the Board of Examiners." So that is where we stand. We will see what happens from here, but it complicates the already complicated case. Of note, the Board of Examiners, all three of them, they're scheduled for a special meeting tomorrow morning at 9 o'clock to discuss this. It likely is executive session action, so we'll keep an eye on it. We'll let you know where it goes. But Brian, the arguments in terms of this case, they were scheduled for sometime in August. We'll have to see what happens here. We know that the private group that thought they had bought the ITD campus, they're essentially asking the Supreme Court in one way or another, can you somehow block this legislation and make sure that the legislation that was blocking it does not cancel this sale, because the private group, Brian, they're still very much interested in acquiring that property on State Street.
It's a nice piece of property.
It's huge.
I can anticipate the questions coming in now. We pay the Attorney General and the lawyers in his office to defend the state in such cases. How much extra is this going to cost taxpayers to go outside of that?
We'll have to put in some public records requests. I can imagine that there's going to be a lot of time and effort put into this very complicated case. I went through dozens or hundreds of pages over the last few days going through this. So to answer the likely questions out there, Brian, this is going to cost taxpayers.
Extra. Exactly.
Extra.
All right. Thank you very much, Joe. All right, we have spent a lot of time on the 208. You know, we've focused on Idaho's majority party, the Republicans, from their conventions to their caucus, from their platform to their primary. After all, they're the ones in charge of most things here in Idaho. But every once in a while, we get a question, hey, what about the Idaho Democrats? What about today? The Idaho Democratic Caucus is officially underway as of 12 minutes ago. It started at 5 and it runs until 8, unless they finish earlier. There's a good chance they might, because there are 6 candidates registered for the Idaho Democratic Caucus. Pretty sure you can guess which one might take the top spot. President Joe Biden is on that list, U.S. Representative Dean Phillips, entrepreneurial leader Jason Palmer, we've got author Marianne Williamson, activist David Olskamp, and educator Armando Perez Serrato. Caucus is really just a formality because President Joe Biden has already clinched enough national delegates back in March to earn the party's nomination. So the Idaho Republican Party, they held their caucus on March 2nd. That's when they named former President Donald Trump as their candidate. We'll let you know how the Idaho Democratic Caucus shakes out, but it looks like it's going to be a Biden-Trump rematch, I'm pretty sure. Republicans will officially select their presidential nominee. That's coming up, their national convention in July. The Democrats, they're going to do theirs in August. former Idaho State police officer tried to say his wife shot herself. Well, today he's been sentenced to life in prison after being found guilty of killing her. Abby Davis covers that and other notable news in today's 411.
And it's your decision to not testify, is that correct?
That is correct.
Today, Chad Daybell said he would not testify in his triple murder trial. That happened right before his defense attorney rested his case. Chad's accused of murdering his late wife, Tammy, and two of his current wife's kids, JJ and Tylee. The state started its rebuttal shortly after. They've called 3 witnesses so far, including a former coworker of Tammy's who talked about her health, someone who worked with Tammy and Chad's oldest son, Garth, and a Fremont County detective. He talked about issues getting in touch with the Daybell kids after her autopsy. Court starts again Tuesday because of the holiday weekend. Also today, a judge sentenced former Idaho State Police Trooper Daniel Howard to life in prison without parole. In March, a jury found him guilty of murdering his wife. Back in 2021, Howard called police and reported that his wife shot herself. But the investigation found the fatal gunshot wound was not self-inflicted. Turning to some summer news, Bogus Basin just released its summer schedule, and there's something for everyone, including a free concert series, mountain bike racing, and other fun activities like yoga on the mountain. For more information, you can visit this story at ktvb.com. And that's the 411 on the 208. I'm Abby Davis.
Well, from those warm memories to the chilly start that we had this morning, mountain locations were expecting snow once again. At those higher elevations, yes, we didn't expect a lot of accumulation in those mid-level elevation areas like McCall or the Sun Valley areas and the valleys, but in this view from Bogus Basin, you can see some light snow even weighing down the trees at times, but it quickly melted and you can see those trees perk back up under the sunshine. A lot more blue skies today, and you can see all those dirt patches are still present, so we didn't see a heavy amount of snow even at those higher elevations in Bogus Basin. So the snow and the colder temperatures gave way to some mild conditions. We've had sunshine and we're at 62 degrees right now in Boise, a little on the breezy side. So with the combination of the winds and some of those cooler temperatures, probably feeling not quite as pleasant as it could be outside if we didn't have the wind. So the low pressure center that brought us a variety of weather conditions yesterday continued to move off to the east today, and that's leaving us with the more dry conditions that we have today, but it is also what's leaving us with some more of these breezy conditions. So right now 14 miles per hour over in Boise, calmer in mountain areas, and the winds have been even more consistent in the Magic Valley with some of those gusts, those maximum gusts at 40 miles an hour in both Jerome and Twin Falls. So definitely some of those stronger winds there. Here's more of those high temperatures throughout the day that we've seen. Higher in Ontario, close to 70 degrees, and we've just exceeded the mid-50s mark over in the Magic Valley, and a little bit cooler in those mountain areas in the 40s and low 50s. So as we go throughout the evening tonight, we'll still see those breezy conditions linger. Tomorrow we will see less of those winds, a little bit of a cooler start for us, and we warm up into the 70s, but you can see as we go throughout those afternoon hours that we'll also see the clouds start to increase. So overall, it's looking a little bit more pleasant for tomorrow. So you can see we start out on the sunny side in the morning, then the clouds increase, and we do have a chance of some sparse showers throughout the afternoon and evening hours for valley locations. The moisture continues as we get to Saturday, very early shower chances, and also we do have some isolated thunderstorm chances as well. You can see some of that moisture potentially extending into the afternoon hours in the mountains. So when we look at the temperatures for all of that precipitation, you can see Friday expected to be 74. We go to the 60s for Saturday, warm back up on Sunday. Sunday is looking really nice and pleasant with lots of sunshine, and again, more on the mild side. We don't have the winds, but overall, tomorrow also looking pleasant for us. Temperatures dip back down, winds come back up on Saturday, and you can see overall things are looking up as far as temperatures go. The extended warming trend, lots of 80s on the way in the extended look.
We had a lot of people sending messages today about this ITD deal and saying things like, well, if the lawmakers are the ones that unwound the deal, or the AG's filing and messing up this whole deal that we had to go find outside counsel, why are they not on the board for paying for it? Why are they not held accountable to pay for it out of their own pockets? Just kind of how government works. You vote them in, you get the good and the bad with them. And Steve kind of saying, well, what a lot of people have been saying kind of behind closed doors maybe, just more evidence of how the Idaho AG is on a power trip, getting ready to run for governor in 2026. We'll see what happens. Was there any instances of a child being negatively impacted by a library book in Idaho, asked Bonnie? Not that they could bring forth during the legislative session for the last couple of years. Have not seen that, nor was there any evidence brought forth anywhere across the state that we've seen. With the legislature succeeding in passing a law that would make libraries pay a $250 fine if kids have access to books with inappropriate content or what they deem to be inappropriate, I assume their next targets will be Verizon, AT&T, and others for the materials they carry, asked David Eagle. They've tried that the last couple of sessions. This last session, it passed the Senate to put a filter on phones for kids, but it didn't make it out of the House State Affairs Committee. So they tried, but a lot of people are like, that's a private corporation. We shouldn't meddle with that kind of thing. Library law is ridiculous. In the 70-plus years I have been a library patron, I've never encountered a problem that these Republican legislators have fabricated. This law will make it difficult for children to access books. Do we want a nation of critical thinkers, or do we want a nation of sheep? Something to consider. See you tomorrow.